Jack from the Red V podcast, Dragons Tragic Fan, joins the ET stand for an opposition fan preview next. For over 50 years, people have come to see the Sharks play. Talent, skill, speed, intelligence, elite level athleticism. That's not these guys. Biased, one-eyed, opinionated, more often wrong than right. They make up for their complete lack of talent with pure dribble, gibberish, and enthusiasm. This is the ET Stand Podcast. And thanks for joining us on this special episode of the ET Stand Podcast as we welcome in a man who maybe wasn't expecting to be a host of a Cronulla Sharks fans podcast, but I've got to know Jack over the last couple of months. He's a lovely guy. So we've got Jack dropping in to give us the rule of the roost over all things St. George Illawarra Dragons. Jack, thanks for dropping by. How are you, mate?
Yeah, good. Thanks, David. Thanks for having me on. Looking forward to chatting a nice little rivalry that we've got set up for ourselves on Sunday afternoon.
Okay. Now, let's just talk about the rivalry. This East-South rubbish in terms of the Book of Feuds and all that stuff, I reckon we've got a better rivalry from their thing. They can bugger off. What's this? They're the big feud. I'm like, come on.
Yeah. It's definitely on history for those two clubs, but wasn't it was first past the post for the first 20 years in rugby league. I feel like especially St. George Illawarra and Cronulla have developed a really good rivalry. When you think that there was that 99 prelim final. I think you blokes knocked us out of the finals in 2002. And there's been a bunch of players that have jumped ship from the Dragons to the Sharks and vice versa. We've nabbed your coach now. We've got Jack Bird. We've got Valentine Holmes next year. So
Sharks.
We've got the 2016 Sharks, except it'll be the 2025 version of them. So I feel like there's a decent rivalry. I think. Yeah, living in the Sutherland Shire, there's always a bit of to and fro between Sharks fans and Dragons fans, because I think there's normally an equal divide amongst residents in the Shire. They're normally Dragons or Sharks fans. So I feel like you come into contact a bit more rather than the South and East fans that you mentioned about, David.
Do you consider the Sharks the rival of the Dragons?
For me, it is, yeah. And I was actually talking with a friend about this today, and he was saying that he felt indifferent towards Cronulla and he despised Canterbury and Melbourne far more. But I think for me, living in the Sutherland Shire as a Dragons fan, I kind of felt like a minority through primary school and high school. I had to kind of go through those local derby years of the Dragons not winning much, and then the Dragons started winning once I left high school, which was very convenient for those Sharks mates of mine. And now I think you guys have won the last 6 in a row against us, so it's been a little, yeah. I was trying to kind of dumb it down a little bit there, Dave, but you've probably got me with a little bit of truth serum there. It's been a while. I think 2020 was the last time we beat you guys, and I think the last time we beat you at one of our home grounds is probably even longer before that. It's been a while for us long-suffering Dragons fans, mate. That's for sure.
Why did you pick the Dragons before we get into the match preview?
All family. My dad is a massive Dragons fan. He started following them probably as a bit of a bandwagoner in the late 60s, moving down from the Central Coast and not having any interest in rugby league. And I think one of his mates invited him to a Cogra Oval to watch the Dragons. But there's certainly been no bandwagonership on my part. I've suffered through a few grand final defeats and those glorious 2005 and 2006 prelim losses under Nathan Brown as coach. So from family, and from there I've been able to kind of meet some really good people, as I'm sure you've been able to through your podcast, through the Red V podcast. I got to meet some really great Dragons fans at games, and people come up to you and want to shake your hand and want to say hi to you and that kind of stuff. So it's I'm well and truly strapped in now. There's no way out at the moment. I don't think
there's no turning. What about the 31-30 loss out at the Panthers when it was 5th versus 4th? Do you remember that one? That was
do I remember it? Yeah, I think I was probably
remember thinking that Dragons team was actually really good, and
I think they could have won it that year. They probably would have fallen over under Nathan Brown. I don't think he was a master tactician, but I think that side was probably a little bit better than the 2005 side, because that side still had like Nathan Blacklock in the side. I think we had Lincoln Withers at dummy half, who was a nice little kind of creative player off the bench. Yeah,
a legend.
So that was painful. I'd stored that far back in the memory bank. So thanks for bringing that one up.
So there are a few iconic Dragons moments from around that time. Yeah. There's obviously the Nathan Brown pass to the headbutt, which was, what was it, Lance Thompson is on it. Yeah. There's also the Nathan Brown slap. Like, what did you look back on that time? You just kind of laughing about that, or you just like try to forget? Like, where does that sit for you?
Yeah, it's just kind of like a funny thing. I think the first time I remember seeing some of that stuff was Boots and All. Do you remember that show with Gus and
City? And it's Boots and All. Yeah, I definitely. How good was that show?
I was probably a little bit too young to vividly remember the Lance Thompson, Nathan Brown gaff, because I was only 10 at the time. But it's just water for ducks back. I feel like if you're one of those fans that gets your hackles up about an embarrassing moment in your club's history, every club has had a player that's missed an easy conversion from right in front. There's always things about your club that you're a little bit embarrassed about. So I just let that run off. I just kind of laugh about it when it does get brought up, which it actually gets brought up quite a bit if you're a Dragons fan, especially to kind of casual fans. They're like, oh, I've seen a Dragons clip. It was like a guy tapped the ball and threw it into someone's head. So even the casual fans that aren't even like NRL supporters, Dave, are the ones that
or the Trent Barrett one.
The Trent Barrett one. There was a few for Baz. I think he gets a bad rap as a Dragons player. I think a lot of fans kind of not huge fans of him, and always thought that he played better football in the State of Origin arena than he did for the Dragons. But I've always been a big fan of his. I thought probably one of the best pure runners that we've had in the halves, probably kind of in our history. That drop ball over the line against Canberra, not one of his finest moments at all.
Sharks fans don't love Trent Barrett, even though he played for us for a little bit.
So that's what I mean. There's a few, even the late great Lance Thompson, like he came across with you guys for
Lance Thompson. Right? They love Lance Thompson.
And if we go through the annals of history, Dave, if Super League had got up in 1996, there's a good chance Nathan Brown would have played for the Sharks, because he was actually training with them along with Jay Stevens and Paul Stevens and a few of the other guys that were obviously wanted to get the Super League bucks. So Nathan Brown could have been the number 9, and we might not have seen the glorious locks of Dean Treaster for all those years in the late 90s and early 2000s.
I remember going to Cogra Oval and watching the Sharks beat the Dragons, and this guy this Dragons fan in that main stand just absolutely tearing Nathan Brown apart. He's like, "Why, Nathan? 2 steps. Just pass the ball from dummy half. Stop doing it, Nathan. We all know you don't run. You're not fast enough to run. Just pass the ball." And he's just his own guy. It's the first time I can remember like a home fan like clearly heckling their own guy. I was like, whoa.
Which seems to be commonplace now. But back 15, 20, 30 years ago, it was like, oh, okay, that is a very passionate fan there that's screaming at one of our own players.
Well, that's fair enough. How do you feel about the merger? Are you a post-merger person? You're like, we're just St. George Illawarra, or do you wish it was still St. George Dragons?
Oh, there's probably moments where I would love the Dragons to play all 12 home games at Cogra and would love them just to be a standalone club. But like when the merger happened, I was only 9. So this is basically, I think I might have gone to 1 or 2 St. George games at Cogra Oval, but it was the way of the future for the Dragons. Like, I think the way that the competition was morphing kind of around the turn of the millennium, St. George in its current form, with you look at the high-rise apartments in places like Hurstville and Cogra, and the real demographic change of residents that are living there. People aren't interested in rugby league there. So a lot of the people that come to the Cogra home matches are fans like me that live in the Sutherland Shire, or a lot of fans that live out in Western Sydney or Southwest Sydney, that they don't live in the local area anymore. So I feel like it was a smart decision. And you look through the 25 years, might not be full of success. I guess that one premiership is certainly a highlight. But you look at the
wrong with winning only one premiership.
That's right. That's right. We won't be arguing about that at all. Yeah, but I think the Illawarra region and the young families, even now, there's so many young families down through the Illawarra down the south coast in that Group 7 territory. I think it's a smart decision, and hopefully under Shane Flanagan over the next 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, how many years he stays at the Dragons, we can kind of set ourselves up for success. And there's plenty more kind of Ryan and Toby Couchmans coming through the system for the Dragons.
All right. Well, we'll talk about Shane Flanagan in a second. I will just, before we move off history, I'll just say for Dragons fans out there, that 96 grand final and that Matthew Ridge incident, you are absolutely dudded.
Thank you.
Dudded. That was one of the biggest BS calls, and the Dragons were right to take the 2 points to go 8-2 down with 30 seconds. Yeah, it was absolute rubbish. But anyway,
the Dragons might not have gone on with it, Dave, but I think it was such a long moment.
That game was
and what doesn't get spoken about enough is that year Manly robbed us of a St George Cronulla grand final that has still never happened. Maybe it will happen one year. Because Cronulla had made the prelims against
Manly were a lot better than us in that 24-0. I was at that 24-0 game. Jack, I went to 9 consecutive grand final qualifier matches and saw the Sharks lose all of them in a row until that Cowboys won. So in terms of being a Sharks tragic, I can definitely talk to that. Let's pull up this Dragons team. Look, there's a few names that I don't know in the Dragons team. Let's talk about the coach. Shane Flanagan is an absolute gun coach. Anyone who doesn't think he's the gun coach is wrong, because the Sharks are a difficult team to win a premiership with. And so far, he's the only one that's done it. And you could argue that Wayne Bennett's the only one who's done premiership winning team with the Dragons. How are you guys feeling about Flano as a coach? Is he your future? Is he lock for the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think so. I think the fan base is really behind him. I think they're really thankful that we've had an opportunity to sign a coach like that, with the pedigree that he had at Cronulla, but not just there. But he was the number 2 to Ricky Stewart at Cronulla before that. He was assistant coach at the Roosters, so he's been around for such a long time. He's just a smart operator. I think what we saw at Cronulla was his ability to not only get the best out of his players, but also be a top level recruiter. Like when you look at that Cronulla side that he took over when Ricky Stewart decided that it was just a little bit too hard to be coming into Shark Park every day and wanted to get out of there. Shane Flanagan took over a god-awful Cronulla team. And from the back end of 2010 to 2016, in 6 years, he took them from a side that were the bottom-feeding side in the competition to being one of the most feared sides, one of the most gritty and defensively determined sides, and obviously winning a premiership as well in one of the most nerve-wracking grand finals probably ever if you're a Cronulla fan. Shows his ability. I think it gets lost a little bit. I think people look at 2016 and then there's all the peptide stuff and him being suspended and the emails and all that kind of stuff. But he recruited, even before he recruited James Maloney and Mick Ennis, who I feel like were the players to get the Sharks to the next level. Chris Hynington, Andrew Feeder, guys like John Morris there. Sam Tagatese, probably a player that's, I don't know what Sharks fans' opinions are of him, but he was a really solid.
Sam Tagatese, especially this one.
Solid linchpin. Even someone like a boring player like a Jeff Robson that was an organizer, Todd Carney. There might have been an element of luck in those signings. And I think as Dragons fans, our hope is, we might not be able to get a Todd Carney-esque player, but getting guys like Damien Cook and Val Holmes that still might have 2 or 3 good seasons in them can kind of set us up to transition into signing some other players, younger players coming through. So the fans are very positive. They were positive from the moment that we announced the signing, and I think now the Dragons knocking on the door of the top 8, which Shane Flanagan spoke about a lot during the preseason, but I don't know if there was many fans, myself included. I had us at 8 or 9 wins for the year. That was a successful year for me. I think fans seeing the impact that he's having on the side, especially over the last probably 4 to 6 weeks of the season, are really tuned into Flano and really enjoying him at the club.
Which players have really improved under Flanagan?
I think probably all of them. Zach Lomax is probably the one that stands out, and I know there's been a lot of fanfare about his move to the wing and now him signing with Parramatta and that kind of stuff. I think Lomax, as soon as Flanagan was announced as coach, Lomax's form really was heading in a northerly direction last year, and then moved to the wing. He's been fantastic. But you see, like on the list, numbers 3 and 4, Matt and Max Fianet, they've been really good as well. They were guys that was a regular first grader the last couple of years under Anthony Griffin, but fell away badly at the back end of last year. I think his performance has really improved. Was playing fullback in New South Wales Cup and has got an opportunity with Moses Sully out to be back in the centres, and Max Fianet has been really solid. And just to point out another one of the backline players, Christian Tuipulotu, he's been quite a good player. I think a lot of fans kind of saw that signing and we thought, might be like a bit of a depth signing. If there's injuries, he might play half a dozen games, but he's turning into a real weapon out on that right hand side. I mean, in terms of the forwards, I think DeBellin and probably Sewer. Jaden Sewer's had, I would say, a career year. Played State of Origin. Thought he was pretty harshly dropped by the Queensland side. So much for Billy Slater and the Queenslanders. Sticking with their players. That certainly didn't happen.
With 3 State of Origin players in this team.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that shows the improvement of the side. But I think we could sit here for a couple of hours. You go through each player and break down the stats of how and why they've improved. But they're probably the 3 or 4 that I would have in the improvement bunch for the Dragons, especially Jaden Sewer. I think he's a key player for the Dragons, not just this weekend, Dave, but I think moving forward over the rest of the season if the Dragons are going to do any damage at the back end of the year.
And Jack Bird obviously playing 5'8" after Flanagan his son was done for biting, which was also ridiculous. That just blew my mind that he got suspended for that. But, anyway. How's Jack Bird been playing?
Not a fan of Jack Bird. We've been quite critical of him in the podcast, although last night I did highlight him for special praise. I thought he was really good last week. I said on the podcast that I thought he played like you'd expect a veteran player of his experience and games played to play. And maybe it just simplified things a little bit. I thought it was a bit ridiculous earlier in the year that Flano had earmarked him to play in the centres. He came out and said that Bird was too slow to play in the forwards, but then supposedly was quick enough to play in the backs, which, as we know now, your outside backs have to have a lot of really good lateral speed. So, if he can put in a performance like he did last week, I think he's going to be a solid performer over the rest of the season for the Dragons. And really he should. He's played there before. He's played plenty of football there. I think his debut year for the Sharks in 2015, he played a lot of 5'8", until James Maloney came across and he got shifted out to the centres. And I think for Jack, the unfortunate thing for him has been, and I don't know if you agree with me on this, Dave, but whatever team he's played for, they've never really been able to find a position for him. I think his versatility has probably killed him a little bit. He's played, I think when he signed with the Broncos and left the Sharks, which I was dirty on that. I'm not a huge fan of the Sharks, but as local rivals, but I just thought that was a bit of a crap.
It was an odd choice. That was an odd choice.
I know the money certainly talks, but he went up to there to play as a fullback. He played centre and played Origin, won a premiership with the Sharks at centre, came back to the Dragons, played centre, 5'8", second row. He was playing in fullback in New South Wales Cup up until a couple of weeks ago, now back in the 5'8" role. I think the versatility, even in the modern day game, can be a little bit of a curse, and I think that's the case with Jack Bird. But I'm happy and excited to see what he does in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
And for the Sharkies match.
Yeah, he will. He was fired up last time, and he's going to be keen to try and get a win. And hopefully he plays good enough, Dave, that it gives Shane Flanagan a headache come week 1 of the finals. Fingers crossed, if the Dragons are able to make it, that maybe Kyle Flanagan isn't an automatic selection. And Kyle Flanagan has to come back via the bench or something. But we'll see what happens. I feel comfortable with him being a veteran player in the halves, and his running game as well, I think, can be pretty solid for the Dragons moving forward.
You mentioned Flanagan and playing the Sharks and Jack Bird and the like, and I guess Kyle Flanagan, if he was in the team, would also be rather motivated. It seems that there's lots of chat around how the Dragons will react to the Sharks. Sharks don't seem to have as much of a Dragons connection this time around. How do you think Shane Flanagan's managing the comms. I thought he played into our hands last time. This time he's just a little cheeky and sheepish with his comments in the media towards the Sharkies, isn't he?
Yeah, I said on the podcast last night as well, Dave, that I thought that Flanagan's ego got the better of him in that first game. I think he would. Yeah. You can't say that Flanagan doesn't want revenge on Cronulla after the way everything went down. Whether rightly or wrongly you believe that he was harshly done by, or whether it was fair for the Sharks to let him go and all the NRL stuff and the bans and different things, he definitely wants revenge. And I think last time he was a bit like a cat in a hot tin roof. I think he wanted to come out. He wanted to see the Dragons beat Cronulla in Cronulla's backyard as a big kind of up yours to anyone that had ever doubted him and that kind of stuff. But I think this time around, he's probably seen that was a mistake. He spoke in the presser after the game against the Gold Coast, and he was as you mentioned,
very, down a bit more.
Very sheepish, quiet. I believe that the remark during the week from training was that, he's just told them this is another game and it's another game they need to win, just like they needed to win against the Gold Coast and they needed to win the week before against Canterbury. It's just another game. It's hard as well because I think the position the Sharks are, like, I think from our point of view as Dragons fans, beating the Sharks is a huge scalp. Whereas for Cronulla, this is just another game for them. Like, it's obviously a local derby and Sharks fans and Sharks players.
Game for the Sharks.
Oh, it's an important game, but I don't think the feeling that the Sharks fans would have if they beat the Dragons would be as great as, like, this is a huge game for us. Like, if we can win this game, this almost
it's not like the Sharks team with Lance Thompson or Jason Stevens in it or Trent Barrett, where we've got heaps of ex-Dragons in our team going the other way.
And I think when you've dominated another team like Cronulla has, like 7 or 8 in a row, whatever it is. Like, I think, it takes a little bit of the luster away from the derby from your point of view, from a Sharks player's point of view, because it's not that hotly contested derby where you need to fight tooth and nail to win. And I hope that's the case on Sunday. I hope a sold out, like, Wynn Stadium kind of brings that feeling back into it, because I think it has the potential to be one of the best rivalries in the competition. And obviously I'm biased saying that as a Dragons fan, but I just know how big the community in the Sutherland Shire, the St. George region, in the Wollongong area gets into it when these two sides are doing well. And I think it's that good for the Dragons. It was
massive. Absolutely enormous. Like, it was just combined barbecues everywhere, and so if the Dragons can come back a little bit, but it's a pretty important game for you guys. Looking at the table, you'd think maybe the Dolphins and the Broncos have done their dash, but it's no guarantee that you're in the 8, is there?
No, not at all. I think I've said to people that the Dragons hold that destiny in their own hands. If we don't play finals, we only have ourselves to blame. Cronulla obviously a really tough task this week. You have Parramatta, who are fighting and scratching and clawing to not get a wooden spoon. We don't have a great track record against them, especially at CommBank. And then you finish the season against Canberra at Cogra, another kind of plucky side. So the NRL has become so much more competitive. Gone are the days where you played Western Suburbs or Souths in the late 90s and early 2000s, and you knew
guaranteed to win.
Yeah, this is going to boost our for and against.
What the Dolphins have got: the Storm, the Broncos, and the Knights. I guess if the Dragons lose every match, which is possible.
For and against hurts us as well. If that's where this game is huge for us, because if the Dolphins trip up against Melbourne, and you think they would because Melbourne are playing pretty well, and the Dragons could jag a win, then all of a sudden you've got a 4. Yeah, the Dragons would have to drop their last 2, and the Dolphins would need to win their last 2. So, destiny in our own hands, Dave. But, anything can happen in rugby league, and I'm just excited that we're in a position to be fighting for a semi-final spot, because it's been a long time since that's been the case as Dragons fans.
When was the last time the Dragons played finals?
Well, the last time the Dragons played finals, we weren't even doing the podcast. So we started the podcast in 2020, and we haven't once previewed a Dragons semi-final match. So 2018 was the last time they beat the Broncos up in Brisbane and then lost to South in the second week. So, 6 years it's been. But who's counting?
So tell us give us a quick rundown on the podcast. You mentioned it. When do you guys air it? For any
So
Dragons fans out there, to like and
Yeah.
subscribe and follow.
Yeah,
I can't imagine too many Sharks fans are going to follow your podcast. You'll pick up some views this week.
Yeah, any Dragons fans that are watching a Sharks podcast that want to listen to a Dragons podcast, we record on Tuesdays. We've been running it since 2020. We felt there was a real void kind of in the media department in terms of the Dragons. I think the club has a club-run podcast now. They had previously had one, but when we started, there wasn't much. And I'm sure you kind of agree with this, Dave. Like a lot of fans, you want to hear about your own team, and I think if you follow American sports, you follow the NBA or the NBL, or you follow the English Premier League, there's so much kind of club content that people produce, whether it's the club doing it or whether it's fans. And I felt like that was really lacking at the Dragons. And even now, like I feel like the Dragons media team isn't great. Not to put them on blast or anything, but yeah, we felt there was a bit of a void there, and opportunity to talk about the Dragons. It's probably the best job in the world to set your mic up every Tuesday night at 7 or 8 o'clock and talk about the Dragons. And this year we've had a chance to review a lot of nice wins. That great win against Melbourne, a nice win against the Titans last week. So it's been a lot of fun. I'm the only Dragons fan that does the podcast. My co-host is actually a West Tigers fan, a guy by the name of Curtis Woodward. But Kurt grew up in the St. George area. His grandfather played lower grades for St. George. So he knows all about the history and the culture of the St. George Dragons and kind of the lack of success we've had moving forward. So he's been a really welcome addition the last couple of years to the podcast as well.
Well-supported team, the Dragons. You're definitely right. Like, who wants to watch NRL 360 and watch 30 seconds?
Don't get me started.
And watch 30. I reckon we could do a like a you, me, and the West Tigers guy from the West Life podcast, and the On the Ranch guy, and just have like just a group of just like taunting and arguing with each other. Could be quite amusing as a regular show. But certainly,
definitely.
Today's age of the internet means you go infinitely wide and infinitely deep. And so why would you, as a Dragons fan, not want to watch 60 minutes, listen to a podcast just about the Dragons? You go super deep on Christian Tupalutu, who I didn't know how to pronounce his name before. And so it's far more interesting than the other stuff. So I certainly agree with that. Well, you're very knowledgeable on the Sharkies. Looking at this Sharks team, what scares you about the Sharks?
The consistency. I said that last night. I think one of the biggest differences between the Dragons and the Sharks is the Sharks are they're cutthroat consistent under Fitzgibbon. Probably started under Flanagan and it's continued. But I look at Kennedy at the back. Iro is a tackle breaking machine. Mulatalo is great. Even kind of Daniel Atkinson, I think, has come in and done a really good job in the halves, and Blake Brayley, and then Cam McInnes. That's got to be top 5 worst recruitment blunders by the Dragons in terms of letting him go. Zach Lomax is probably in the top 5 as well for next year. But I cringe every time I see Cam.
Big bucks though.
Yeah, he is big bucks, but I think what you're going to get out of McInnes. I think you can probably count on 2 hands the bad games that he has. I think he's a real rock defensively.
He's just a consistent 7.5.
Yeah, and I think you need that. You're not going to have superstar players from 1 through 17. I think if you've got someone there that you can rely on, I think it's great. The forward pack probably worries me. I think that's
a big forward pack.
Yeah,
big dudes.
I've been criticised for referring to the Dragons forward pack as powder puffs before. Are they powder puffs? Like, how does the size of the Dragons? It's got better. It's like when you talk of players improving, it's certainly got better. Jack DeBellin's had a really good year for the Dragons since he's been moved right into the middle in that prop position. And Toby and Ryan Couchman were huge for us last week. Through all juniors, they've got contracts with the club for the next couple of years and have played really well in the lower grades for the Dragons. So they've added some real leg speed and quick play the balls to the Dragons, which I don't think we've had earlier. But I think also you don't generally see the Dragons punch it through the middle an awful lot. They rely on their edges. So they rely on Leilua and Sua. And if Raymond Fatala-Mariner has had a back injury, I'm not convinced he will play on the weekend. They might go with Licking King Togia, who came off the bench last week, to add a bit of utility value. But I think that's going to be the forward pack is going to be where it's won. It's going to be a great battle there. And I think guys like Luciano Leilua and Jaden Sua are going to be tasked with having 15, 16 runs and maybe trying to navigate their way through the middle against some of those big boys. Because you look at the Sharks pack and
they're big hombres.
Yeah, Royce Hunt's been awesome this year. Hammond Wellies is huge. Having Tom Hazen come off the bench is big.
He hasn't
Yeah. But I think that could be the difference maker there. And then, like, I look at their forward pack and I don't see a hell of a lot of weaknesses. And then you look at Britton Nickera, Teague Wilton, and then Cam McInnes in the back row. I think it's going to be a great battle between the forward packs. I think there's quality in both back rows, and it's going to be interesting to see who kind of gets the advantage early on. I reckon we'll get the chocolates.
Were you happy that Sifa Talakai wasn't picked, mate?
Not overly. I'm not huge on Sifa Talakai. I feel like that one game against Manly has given him this, like, where he gave Morgan Harper a bath, who I think you could probably give a bath to, Dave, if you pulled him a Sharks jersey. I think he's a good player. But the Sharks seem to be a little bit unsure of where his best position is. He's filled in the centres. You've been watching that
podcast the last 20 weeks, Jack.
It's hard, isn't it? Like, it's hard to find a role for him because, like, he was moved out of the centres because Cal Iro probably would have left the club, I think, if he had to not rot in reserves, but if he had to continue to play his trade for the Jets a little bit longer. But defensively as well, like, it's one thing to be a ball wrecking back rower out there, I look at the team, even Jack Williams. Like, I think Jack Williams is a really hard runner. I think he's an experienced player. The Sharks just have so much experience throughout their side as well. There's a lot of premiership games under the belt of those players. So
all of those forwards would make the Dragons team, wouldn't they? Rudolph, Kafusi, Nickera, Wilton, McInnes. So they'd all find a spot in the Dragons team.
Oh yeah, yes, definitely. And that's the position we're in, where we're trying to. The Sharks, you guys are trying to go to that next level. You're trying to make it to week 3 of the finals, get to a grand final, whereas the Dragons, we're just trying to improve our roster. So that's where I look at the side, and we're outmatched in a bunch of positions. But the hope is that Flanagan can outcoach Craig Fitzgibbon, and we can do enough good things on the field that, it might be enough for us to get the victory.
So you're hopeful. I heard you're using it.
Definitely.
I reckon the Dragons can win.
Yeah, definitely. And I have not felt confident about this side for a long time. If you go back and listen to some of our podcasts, you'll realize how unfortunate my tipping is with the Dragons. But I'm not going to go like on a limb and say the Dragons are definitely going to win, but I feel like we've got a side that might be able to cause a few headaches for the Sharks. But the Dragons have to play well. I feel like the Sharks don't necessarily have to be at their best to win on Sunday, whereas I feel like the Dragons, they've got to get their kicking game right. They've got to complete their sets. They've got to contest well. They've got to try and control the ruck. Jacob Little has a big job to do that in the middle. If all those things we line up all our ducks in a row and they do that, I think they can win. But I could see the Sharks completing it 72 or 73% and then just having a bit of class throughout the game and doing enough to win. So it's going to be, I'm really keen to see it. It's going to be a good spectacle, I think, on Sunday.
Yeah, it should be good fun. What is it, 4:00 down at Wynn
Stadium? Are you going down there, Dave? Are you going to get your passport stamp, mate? Or
I don't think I am. Well, I injured my hamstring, actually. So regular
Matt Moylan-esque injury, I heard.
I'm very Matt Moylan-esque, and I'm a big fan of Matt Moylan's, actually. So I've been absent on the last 2 Sharks ET Stand podcasts. So, I'm struggling to just get through sitting in the lounge at the minute. So I don't mind a trip to Wollongong, but I probably won't venture down this time, I don't think.
That's fair enough.
I don't think I can hardly walk, to be honest. So it makes it a little bit hard to get down to the Dragons. Lastly, question it's 2 questions I want to ask you before we wrap it up. Where do you think the Dragons sit in terms of getting a rough deal from referees in the NRL? Where I ask every opposition fan who comes on, because every opposition fan is convinced that they're at the bottom and they're always getting the toughest, the rawest deal. So where do you think the Dragons fall compared to the Sharks, compared to the rest of the league?
I laugh, Dave, because someone actually asked us this in our Fans Corner segment last night, and my co-host Kurt said that Dragons fans sometimes have tinfoil hats on and think that they're not getting the rub of the green at all. I feel like it eventually evens out. I I probably haven't watched enough of Cronulla to see if they get the rub of the green more than other teams, but Penrith definitely do. The Roosters definitely do. Those sides at the top, always the ledger seems to go their way inevitably until it comes to the last 10 minutes when your side's down by 30 and Ashley Klein will blow 3 penalties in a row, give 2 or 3 6 agains in a row to kind of even up the stat sheet. So like I don't think we get an awful rub of the green. I think throughout the sides probably sitting 4th or 5th down to 17th. It's all kind of mixed in a little bit together. And maybe it isn't true. Maybe I need to go back and watch a lot more games, but I feel like it eventually does even itself out by the end of the season when, one of your players has a high shot on someone, they get taken off when your player doesn't get sent to the sin bin. So we'll see. Hopefully no Jack DeBellin sin bins this week because the fans were pretty irate about that happening against the Titans.
Yeah, they tackle your guy high and then you don't get the penalty. Yeah, Katoa's out this week. Everyone was taunting him, saying, Katoa. But he's staying down. I'm like, no, he literally got hit high and is now not allowed to play this week.
It's brutal, isn't it? Yeah,
the poor old rugby league doesn't have the rules quite right, do they? And then lastly, I'll get your take on, look, you've obviously got Ben Hunt as the Dragons halfback. Comparing him to Nico, where do you think Ben Hunt sits in terms of rankings of halfbacks through 1 to 17, and where does Nico sit compared to Ben Hunt?
I'll probably put I think people are very critical of Nico Hines. I'm a huge fan of his. I would be sitting Nico somewhere in the top 5 of the halfbacks in the competition. I think he does a lot of good stuff off the ball. I think as footy fans, we don't necessarily see that if we're watching from home or if we're watching in the game kind of caught up in the atmosphere. But you look at the organisation that he does, getting people in positions, getting block runners in positions, making sure that everyone knows their assignment. I'm very high on him. And the Sharks have done really well to, I guess, navigate through this period without him with that ankle injury.
They have done well, actually.
And I think that credit deserves to go to Craig Fitzgibbon and the coaching staff for that. In terms of Ben Hunt, I would have Ben Hunt probably somewhere around kind of 5th or 6th. I feel like he gets a really bad rap from Dragons fans, and maybe rightfully so at times.
I think so. Ben Hunt's pretty good.
Well, I think the way he positioned for a release last year was very bad, and that was in very bad taste as club captain. But I think since then, and since Flanagan's come in, I think he's turned over a new leaf. For a side coming 8th to have a halfback that has the most try assists in the competition, that doesn't get spoken about enough. I think when the graphic comes up on Fox, Dan Ganane or Warren Smith might make a fleeting comment about it, but he's integral to the success of the Dragons. So it's no surprise that he had a down game against Canterbury and we lost, and then he came out and marshaled the troops brilliantly, kicked really well for that win against the Titans. So he sits probably somewhere between 5th and 6th in terms of the halfbacks in the competition for mine. And I think in terms of the importance that a player has to the Dragons, I think he's probably right up there for the Red V, because I think without him, the Dragons would be way down the table. I don't think we can even get close to the finals over these next 3 weeks if something would happen to Ben Hunt. So very high on his performance this year for the Dragons.
I think that's probably right. All right, well, Jack, great to have you in. I'm going to hit the cue up the
you're playing
music just to make you listen to the great Cronulla song.
Well, it's in a bit of a different tune, so I can tolerate it.
Yeah, it's not quite the just jamming over the top with the songs. A bit of controversy around the Up Cronulla song at the moment, with the words being changed and whether it's fits you, hits you, or whatever that is in terms of that verse a little bit later. So that's an ongoing dispute as well. So, mate, just telling everyone who's listening, thanks to everyone who's made it this far. Do hit the like and subscribe button on YouTube if you're listening, and for those on Spotify, g'day, give us a rating. Where can people, so they can catch Red V Podcast? What are the channels that you're on there?
Yeah, we're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. We've got a YouTube account, but we don't upload too much to there. So, Spotify and Apple Podcasts probably the places to go. And, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram if you want to give us a follow or a like.
Sounds good. And you'll be down at the match on Sunday?
I will, yeah. I've talked my wife into it. I'm taking my 5-month-old son for his first ever experience. So, hopefully we're talking about a Dragons victory. So, fingers crossed, Dave. And, best of luck to your boys, but maybe not too much luck, if you know what I mean.
Well, I do understand. Hopefully we're not talking about the referees. I do like the Dragons.
Yeah, definitely, yeah.
I don't buy into this hating the Dragons stuff, but a lot of the other Sharks fans do. But Jack, you're an absolute gentleman. It was great to have you on this episode of the ET Stand podcast. Please do keep an eye out for our debrief episode, which will come out about just after the Matty Johns show, after full time. We'll do it just around about when the NRLW matches is wrapped for the Sharks versus the Dragons, which is actually the NRLW is running after the main game.
It is, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's quite a good little innovation for the guys to run there. All right, that was the Opposition Fan Preview. Thank you to Jack Clifton from the Red V podcast. Hope you have a crap Sunday, Jack.
Thanks, Dave. Best of luck to you and your boys as well, mate.
Best of luck to you, mate. We'll see you next time. See you guys.
See you, mate.
For over 50 years, people have come to see the Sharks play. Talent, skill, speed, intelligence, elite level athleticism. That's not these guys. Biased, one-eyed, opinionated, more often wrong than right. They make up for their complete lack of talent with pure dribble, gibberish, and enthusiasm. This is the ET Stand Podcast.